Alright guys, such a comic again today. Hope you're doing enjoying your take so far. Just 2 days away from the major getting underway in Dallas, and nobody has any idea who is going to win this tournament. Scrap says that is because the skill gap in this game right now is particularly low. Does he have a point that is why we are seeing the field very tightly converging, and this bracket is absolutely impossible to predict it feels, or is Scrap only saying that because he's barely got above a 1 KD so far this season, and Thieves are not exactly the best team in the game on paper going into the major? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. As always, the stage is set for the major tournament in a couple of days. First of all, however, the weather has been affecting things. I think BenJ, among others, I'm sure were delayed getting into Dallas yesterday. I'm flying in today, so hopefully that's all going to be okay. But they have, as a result, delayed this boot camp, right? So they're doing this Alpha Brain Invitational. Effectively, it's some of the top challenger teams playing in a pre-LAN. And we used to see this way back in the day with the pros. They would often do this before the events. They would come together and do, like a LAN party setup type thing. And they would, well, often it would be a key talking point because some of the times the teams that attended, they would make major strides. Could be critical for some of those challengers teams. Obviously, it's a very important event for the challengers as well. We can expect probably multiple teams making changes in the Pro League after this event, so you really want to be at the top of challenges this time out in Dallas. But they're doing this bootcamp plan as a result, and as we see, they're delaying it by a day. So it's meant to be today, now it's going to be tomorrow instead. People are getting delayed, there's issues. Still seems to be very cold in Dallas, so the snow on the ground is not exactly going anywhere, even if it's not snowing anymore. So yeah, I'm sure it's going to be pretty interesting to get out there. Maybe adds even more of an air of unpredictability to this tournament this weekend. Also there was a little bit of talk about, because Thieves put this video together, and well, in the back we can see it's aBeZy, it's Scrap, and it's HyDra. Now, to be fair, there's no real space here for Kenny there as well, but there was some talk, oh, well, it's Kenny the odd man out and this type of stuff. Look, a couple of weeks ago, I would have bought into that logic, but I think we can see based on the player cams for Thieves over the last couple of weekends, certainly last weekend's, they seem to be vibing pretty well as a team right now. You do get a glimpse of how things are internally based on what you see on those player cams. Donnie been telling our show yesterday that Ken has been kind of trying harder to integrate with the team outside of the game as well, and it looks like that could be paying some degree of dividends. Thieves looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. Yeah, they did lose to Exceed, but obviously Scrap has his opinions on that, we'll see in a second. The other thing that Scrap was talking about was about the flank and the hindsight cheese. Now, I think the flank, sometimes they do a reasonable job of saying, look, obviously, this is easier said in hindsight than it is at the time. The players don't necessarily know that 3 guys have just come off spawn right there, so what can you really do? Sometimes hindsight is justified in the sense that, like, okay, yeah, maybe they did spawn up in a strange way, but maybe you could have predicted it, right? So it kind of goes both ways. Sometimes things are like, okay, yeah, it's easy to say you should have made this play when they were doing something else, but you didn't really know what they were doing at the time. But of course, it is a post-game show, right? Like, obviously, hindsight is going to be there to some degree. But as Don likes to say, just press X on the stream, right? Just click off the stream. It's okay. As a player, certainly if you've lost, there's probably no real point listening to the flank and, look, you've had a bad day at the office and then you've got 5 guys roasting you for a bad day at the office you had in the most dramatic fashion possible. It's probably not the best thing. But anyway, there was a bit of talk about this because Scrap says that it's now just hindsight Harry's over there at the flank, and I'll share that clip for you guys in a second. Zuma says, damn, they're trying to GA the flank. What's next? GA the casters for, I don't know, calling out players making bad errors or something? And Parasite says he's right, to be honest. No one on the flank has ever won or was ever good at any pro title, any COD title, especially Octane level below pro. So, thought a bit spicy than Parasite because he's kind of saying, look, Scrap, like, we were there as well. We've won plenty of world championship rings. How many have you won? Making the argument that, like, look, we understand hindsight cheese. We've been there, we've done it. But equally, it doesn't mean that criticism isn't necessarily valid on some occasions. So I kind of see both sides of this. Scrap says exactly, which makes it even worse, saying, like, look, you guys have won and achieved things, so why are you yapping like this? Anyway, this is what he has to say.
Like, depending on if they get a kill or not, mega hindsight. I mean, yeah, that's called the flank special, bro. Hindsight has turned into the flank special. That's what we call it over here. Flank special. Yeah, thanks, boys. Thanks. I love that you guys can watch the minimap and understand the right play. I just love that you guys can do that. Good shit, man. You guys are fucking genius. Q-Cab's him, bro. Everyone's him. If you haven't noticed in this game, everyone is him, bro. Everyone's ripping. Everyone's 4-bulleting everyone. Everyone's getting a kill. Everyone's getting the 2-piece. The game is just fucking just mid right now. Just mid. Just a mid game. So just a super mid game. It's all the same shit. It's just if you get those kills.
What do you mean?
Like, everyone's doing the same setup, same plays, same routes.
That's kind of how it always is, though. I mean, the good teams always do the same shit to break shit. They just, bro, the shit team, that's what makes the shit teams the shit teams. They don't do the fundamentals. Like, they don't do the fucking...
There's usually other shit that, like, you can do different ways to do shit. There's none of that. There's just play the fucking game.
Yeah.
I promise you. There's no, I promise you.
No, I mean, no, Ernie, I agree with you that it's a lot of flooding and trading. I agree with you on that.
Like, bro, the reason everyone's so close with each other is because there's no skill gap in the game.
You think so? Like, not at all?
You actually think that there was a complete skill gap that,
well,
like,
compared to back in the day?
4-3, 5-2.
Nah, it's definitely way bigger back in the day. I mean, it's been like that for the last 5 years, but... I mean,
there hasn't been a skill gap in COD since Dynamic came out.
Nah, but like, no, but like, I'm
there's
saying
a
not
skill gap, bro. Just it's
shooting
not
wise
as big.
has been a joke for years.
Nah, there's a skill gap. It's just not as big, bro.
So what do we think about this skill gap take in Black Ops 7? I find it kind of remarkable how quickly things have changed to some degree, because when this game first came out, all the talk was how high the skill gap was. Especially in the aiming department, as we understand, the skill gap should be higher because the aim assist is weaker than it has been. Now, it's not quite as weak as it was at the start of the game, but nonetheless, it does still seem to be in a better spot than it has been before. But now we've seen the first stage, we've seen lots of teams at 4-3, lots of teams at 5-2, and the argument is that, well, because one team isn't ahead of the curve, the skill gap must be lower than we have seen before. Maybe there's an argument behind that, but also maybe there's more to this going on. So Scrap says, look, everyone's ripping, everyone's gunning everyone down, people are frying left, right, rhubarb. Now, look, I said this on the show yesterday, but this is partly the pros' fault, right? Because they use the easiest piss guns to use. They love the M15, they love the Drazah, the guns that have no recoil, that take no skill to use compared to some of the others. So, like, Scrappy is to some degree, I think, part of this issue in the sense that if he is on board with the GAs that we've had, getting rid of some of the weapons, you know, let's say the M8 was the primary AR in this game. I know it's a marksman rifle, it's banned anyway, it's not going to be used, it's unfortunate. Okay, whether you think the M8 would be good in the meta, let's say the meta was M8 and NPC, for example. That was like the mandated meta the pros have used. Yeah, the pros would complain about it, but I'm pretty sure the skill gap in that meta would be higher than it is here. Because these guns shoot super straight, and yeah, sure, maybe everyone is ripping, but also the pros have had a part to play in that phenomenon. So if they want to change it, it's not like the game might be balanced more reasonably than the pros have decided how they want to play it. And I think that if you got rid of the Drazah, you brought in a different SMG, there was a different AR in play as well that took a bit more skill. As I say, back in the day, there was more of a skill gap in shooting. I don't disagree with Scrap necessarily that the skill gap in the shooting department in this game isn't particularly high. I don't think it is. There is the aim assist debate for sure, but in terms of the weaponry, like you go back in the day to Black Ops 3, can't help myself, but in that game, there was all sorts of weapons that were viable. You needed to be good with lots of weapons as well because there was ban and protect. Sometimes they would ban the M8. You'd have to use the XR2 or maybe the Shiva or something. Or maybe you were using the Man of War and they'd ban it. You'd need to use the HVK or something else. That meant that it was more of a skill. You had to be good with multiple weapons, which was more of a challenge. Some players were better at that than others. But even then, the meta was balanced in a way. You weren't using the M8 on every map, but some people would use it on evac, others would use the HVK. The Man of War was not the easiest gun ever to use. It shot kind of slow. It had a bit of a circular recoil pattern. But in recent years, the pros have just gravitated towards these weapons that are just super easy to use. I don't think it's entirely their fault. I think that Warzone and Gunsmith has had a part to play in that as well. Yeah, that's kind of just how the weapons are nowadays. You take the base gun, you stack it with a million attachments, and it shoots incredibly straight. It is what it is. But I think there is part of that. So I don't think Scrap's entirely wrong, but I do think that his argument about the teams being so similar because there's no skill gap in the game, I don't agree with that really to any extent. You see that there is a skill gap in the game because some teams are getting slammed. Surge played FaZe and they got 3-0'd. It wasn't close. If you put a lot of these pro teams against the challenger teams, they will slam them. Yeah, because you argue, looking at some of these map counts, it's a competitive league, but, you know, what's the debate there, right? Is it a competitive league, or is there a low skill gap in the game right now? We often see things like this at the start of the season. You know, I remember Vanguard. People said that Vanguard, there's no skill gap in this game, it's just all run and gun, you know, you just play Bacage, everyone's good at it, etc, etc. At the end of the year, that Thieves team were by far the best team in the game. You could have played that World Championship in Vanguard, I don't know, 100 times. Thieves would have won it like 80 times. They were comfortably the best team. They did, of course, win it that year. And that was, and we often see this, at the end of years, some teams manage to separate themselves from the pack. And that potential is there in the game right now, and it will happen. Like, at some point, teams will separate themselves. The game is pretty complex, especially Overload, understanding the best way to play it. I still think there's a lot of room to grow in especially Overload in terms of how the teams actually approach the game. And you look at a team like Ravens, they play with a lot of pace, they trade very efficiently, and it's like, look, that is the current skill gap, and sure, maybe a lot of teams can do that, and I also think it is partly roster related, right? You've got OpTic, the world champions, every other team made some changes, and it's not clear that every other team improved necessarily, right? Like Gentlemate obviously did improve, but their team was kind of a team of leftovers, really, that didn't get retained or picked up by other teams. FaZe, it's difficult to, I mean, you can't argue they upgraded. They needed a change, but like they've lost to aBeZy and Selim at the end of the day. Thieves, Ghosty and Envoy out the door has raised questions, of course. Toronto, okay, they've brought in ReeaL, but they don't seem to be any better as it stands. So I think there is a bit of that as well, maybe, that some of the real top forces and the concentration of talent in recent years has changed this year to an extent. So I think there's multiple factors here in play, but I definitely think there is still a skill gap in competition. And I don't think you want to fall into the trap as a competitor as saying, oh, well, you know, anyone can win on any day. Because if you want to believe that there's a skill gap, you want to believe that you can be and will be the best team, and you're going to turn up to the event and you're going to prove it and you're going to win. If Thieves are of the opinion that, oh, well, you know, if we bomb out of the major top 8, that was just random, just a random tournament, you know, we just lost because there's no skill gap in the game, it's just a coin flip every series. You know, it's not the mentality that's going to lead you to championship success, in my opinion. So, look, we'll see. Thieves are not the tournament favourites, precisely. They're not a million miles away. I definitely think they could still win it. These are the power rankings we put together at Breaking Point. I think these are pretty good, to be honest. But it's like, how do you predict this? FaZe and Gentlemates in the A tier. I think that's probably fair. Ravens in third. I mean, you kind of have to put them third, don't you? Because they're, you know, above Thieves. Maybe you put Falcons that high, possibly, but maybe they've not quite played the competition and quite shown the levels that Ravens have at times. OpTic down in 6th, in the middle of the B tier, then G2, Toronto, Miami, Boston, Cloud9, Surge. So, you know, and again, Surge are in the F tier. Those guys look horrible, right? There's obviously a skill gap in there somewhere, but at the top end, it is very competitive. So, yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. I think Scrap's not entirely wrong, but certainly I don't think it's the right mentality to have going into a major. They play Ravens again. There's a big rematch there. Scrap said it, didn't he? They were talking about Ravens and he was like, oh yeah, Exceed. Yeah, that guy's really good. That team's really good. So I think what Scrap was kind of saying was, okay, look, online, sure, that's one story. On LAN, it's going to be a different story. We will find out in a couple of days what that looks like. Again, if Thieves were like frying, if Thieves were 7-0, like Scrap's KD so far this season is a 1.02, which is probably the lowest that it's ever been really at this point in the season. Does this game suit him as well as previous games have, just the way that it's played? Maybe, maybe not. I still think Scrap's phenomenal at this game and still very impactful, but maybe he's not quite as good as other games. Still dropping a load of damage, still got the highest Slayer rating on the team. So I'm not like concerned about Scrap's quality of play this year. But like if Scrap had a 1.15 or something, then, you know, would he be making those comments? I don't know. That's a matter for debate in the comments below. But look, some believe that Thieves are going to win. I think it's definitely possible. Don thinks that's going to happen on the show. I think I'm taking like Paris, but I genuinely don't know. Zuba's gone FaZe, Aix and Enable have gone Thieves, Parasite and Octane have gone Gentlemates. You know, OpTic could win, Falcons could win, Ravens could win, maybe. But I think on LAN, it's understandable to lean the way of some of the more experienced and the theoretical better teams. But look, we're only going to find out in a couple of days' time. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.